Hi, so my name is Mansi and this is my demo video for the Lingo.dev Multilingual Hackathon number 3. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about how I got this idea and a little bit about like the background. So a few minutes ago I was sitting in my poetry class and we had an assignment um, where we had to read one of our favorite poems, and since I was the only brown person in the class, I had read a poem that I had written in Hindi, whereas everybody else had read a poem that was in English. After I was done reading, I saw everybody just like smiling politely, kind of like that awkward smile where you don't really know what is going on. And I had not thought about that previously, so my teacher actually translated on Google Translate in real time, and after she translated it, I could see that something was missing. There was there was a rhythm in the original poem that had vanished in the translation, and a lot of the words had been directly translated, and the meaning of those words used in the context was lost. And I think that was a really disappointing experience, but it also, was like kind of meaningful to me. Which is why when I came across this hackathon, I kind of immediately knew what I had to build. So this is VerseShift, and this is just a poetry analysis and translation tool that just it does not just translate your poem, but it also helps you understand what happens to a poem when it crosses across languages, and where the meaning is lost and what could be better in the translation. So word shift will show you where the meaning shifts again, like where the metaphors break down, and especially where culture gets lost within the translation. This is built using Next.js, Lingo.dev, and Grok. And I have made this for anybody like me who has ever felt like their words have lost some meaning between languages. So under the hood, Lingo.dev's SDK is handling all the translation here. Um, I have used 16 languages. So yeah, and on top of that, I've used Grok with Llama models to analyze those translations done by Lingo.dev, and those analysis basically just scores how well the meaning is survived, where the metaphors has drifted, and just where the idiom equivalents are across cultures. The front end here is built using Next.js app router, and I've used an API called web speech for the audio playback, which I will be explaining in a bit. So just so users can actually hear how the poem sounds in each language, without needing an external text-to-speech service. So let's start. If you don't have a poem ready, VerseShift includes a poem of the day. Not just if you don't have a poem, even if you just want to like learn a new poem or just like experiment. This is being scraped from a poetry database. So here today we have E. Cummings' poem, and you can just load it into the analyzer with one click, and you can see it here. But today I kind of want to talk about something like use something more personal, so I'll paste a short um, poem in Urdu. And so here we're going to select our source language, which is Urdu. We can also like upload a text file. So here I'm going to choose the auto translate. For now, I'm also going to explain what the compare translation does. So as you might know, writing has a lot of voices, even just in academic writing or just like formal business writing, or just free verse writing. There's always a tone that you need to use. So here we have different tones, because obviously I understand that a translation cannot always just be in one tone, and you might have different needs or wants with what you want to achieve. So for now, I'm just going to use the default voice. So the second thing over here is called a glossary log. So what this means is basically, for example, if you've written a poem or there's a poem and it has somebody's name in it, and names usually mean something, and so here you can type the name. So for example, it says Eden, right? And if I type Eden, or you can type it in any language, for example, if I wanted to log this word, and what locking a word basically does is that word won't be translated, and the word will be kept the same throughout any translation that you do. And I feel like this was a really important feature, because especially when you have nouns in your poems, you don't want them to change. So yes, so here is the poem that I've entered, and here are the languages that I can choose from. So to demo, I'm going to choose English, I'm going to choose let's say Spanish, and maybe Korean. So here I'm going to click analyze poem, and it's going to take a second. So here you can see that each translation appears as a card and it shows a score, and you might be wondering what that score is. It's basically just a preservation score, and it just talks about how similar your translation is to the original poem. And it also gives you structural warnings over here, as you can see, if the poem has changed, like the form. And it also gives you meaning shift alerts when like some imagery or a cultural metaphor does not survive the translation. So here you can see that the score of English is 85 because some idiomatic expressions have been lost, the tone and style is not perfectly preserved. And here, so the concept of mikda in Urdu is just like a wine shop, and so that might not be understandable to somebody that is not a native Urdu speaker, right? So it talks about how that concept might just be culturally specific, and the role of the imam might be a person that just speaks English might be unaware of that. And so also, if you don't speak the script, like if you don't know how to read the script, here is an audio option.
Esta es la taberna, aquí están los libertinos, aquí el copero.
I just didn't want there to be a barrier of somebody being able to read, because I know a lot of people speak a language but they don't read the script. So I thought this would be a good feature to have. And also you can save the translation. For example, here is the English translation saved into a text file. Also, sometimes I've seen that people like to share translations, with friends or family, or they also like to share them on social media, especially people that are poets or writers. So here's an option of sharing the card, and this is what the card looks like. It has the original poem and the translation and the score. So I can just download the image, and this is what the image looks like. So yeah, and then we also have an option here called idiom equivalence. Like I mentioned, idioms, metaphors, they're especially things that are lost between cultures, and it just explains them in the chosen languages, and it explains what it means, you know. So this is not a haram, and people might not know what haram is, so it just talks about that. And yep, so just to like prove or show you how different this is from just normally Google translating, here let's focus on this part. Let's say, so this says some are intoxicated, some are thirsty-lipped, while some hold a goblet in hand, but what can one do about it? This is the system of tavern. Whereas Google says some is drunk, someone is thirsty, someone has a cup in their hand, but no matter what anyone does about it, it is the system of the tavern. So as you can see, like the poem on Google, it is kind of losing the original essence. And just to check it with the feature here, we're gonna compare the translation. So the source language is Urdu, the translation language is English, default voice again, original poem. This is the existing translation, and I'm using this because even though there's a lot of forms that don't have any translations, there are still people that are working in this field and they translate poems. And just in case you don't take those translations as they are, and this feature can just help you know if there's any faults with it. So we're gonna compare those, and here you can see that this is the English. Here you can see what things are wrong with it. Again, here there's extra things that have been mentioned, such as some translations of the words are not really capturing the original meaning. So yeah, and the second function that we have over here is called the drift chain. So again, like it says, this is just like a game of poetry. And sometimes we used to play those games where a person would whisper a thing into somebody's ear and they would just keep passing that message on. I think that translation is somewhat similar. And so over here you can kind of see how much your poem is changing throughout different languages. So I'm gonna run the drift chain and wait for it to show up. So here we can see how the meaning evolves at every step, right? And it visualizes how each language reshapes the poem like a little bit in its own way. See that the translation of the French and Arabic is somewhat better, and only 5% is lost, and most of the meaning is preserved. Again, from Arabic to English, and then again to Urdu. So as we can see, a 5% cumulative drift has happened, just like a fun little visualizing thing that helps us explains how translation works, especially in poetry, which is I think one of the hardest things to translate. Yeah, and the last and final feature that we have is called Poetry Pen Pal. So as I mentioned in the introduction, this idea started from somebody else not being able to read a poem that I really like, and I think this is a really nice feature to have, because you can create a shared room and you can exchange poems with somebody in other language. And so a good thing about this is you can type things in the language you speak and it will be translated in the language the other person understands. So here I'm just gonna enter my name, and I speak Hindi. I'm gonna create a room, and I'm gonna send the link to my friend Ira, who only speaks English and she does not understand Hindi or read Hindi. So she is going to join my room and she's gonna say, "Hi, can you send me a poem?" And I've sent the message, and you can see that it's gonna take a couple of seconds to show up here. And here we go. I cannot read English, so I get the message, "Namaste, क्या आप मुझे कविता भेज सकते हैं?" And now I'm gonna take, we have Kabir Das's Doha. I'm gonna say, "जी ये रही एक कविता जो मुझे बहुत पसंद है." And the good thing about this is that even if I cannot speak Hindi, like the script, I can type in Roman and it's still going to translate it. So I've sent it, and I'm gonna wait for it to show up on Ira's screen. So here we go, and here's a poem that I really like, and here's the translation of the poem. So yep, this is VerseShift, and I do hope to improve it, and if there's any suggestions, I would love to hear them. But yeah, this is what I've built this week, and I hope it helps somebody.